All right, folks, let's talk about action scenes. Action scenes are like the bread and butter of lit RPG, and lit RPG is what I write. So I have a lot of experience in writing action scenes. And action scenes can make or break your story. However, they can also do as much harm as good. They are both the spice that adds excitement, and they can just become incredibly dull if you repeat them too many times. And so my goal is that by the end of this video, you have a clear sense of how to make sure that your action scenes are adding to the story instead of detracting from it. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we need to know, though, is that action scenes are one of our primary tools for controlling pacing. So if you have a book that is dragging, action is one of the ways that you speed up the tempo. And the reason that that works is because in real life, if something high action happens, it happens in such a short amount of time that it becomes exciting naturally. Our adrenaline starts pumping. We get really excited about whatever's going on. The human body is designed to keep itself alive at all costs. And so we have all of these flight-fight responses that can be triggered as we're reading a story, right? As we imagine ourselves in a situation, we will all of a sudden start feeling the tension or the excitement or the dread, whatever it is that the characters are feeling. However, this also presents a challenge because when an action scene takes place in a book, it happens over a long period of time in that we experience it at the pace we read rather than at the pace that it actually happens. And so you might have a scene where there are multiple combatants, let's say, in a tavern brawl, and one person flips up a table, another person grabs a mug and smashes somebody over the head, another person, steps forward onto a stool and leaps into the air, jumping over the table as it's flipping, right? Another person retreats and pulls out a crossbow to shoot somebody, and the guy in the corner just sits there drinking his beer, right? And all of that is happening simultaneously. In reality, all of that might happen in a split second, but it takes longer to describe it because I can only describe one thing at a time, and it takes people longer to read it. And so the pace of an action scene is not actually predicated on how quickly everything is happening. Instead, the pace of an action scene is dictated by the language we use and the cadence of the fight, or the cadence of the action. Because an action scene could just as well be, an escape. Somebody's, leaping from a rooftop onto a moving bus and then slipping off and grabbing onto the side and then, managing to stabilize themselves and jumping to the underside of a bridge and climbing up over the bridge and starting to run and hearing sirens behind them. And all of this stuff is happening, right? And it might take time for it to happen in real life, but the cadence might be in the action scene is completely different. In fact, sometimes something takes a long time in reality, but actually happens in a very short amount of time in a story. And actually, a chase is a good example of that, right? Somebody might run for a minute or two, which is a relatively long time to be full of adrenaline and totally pumped. And we might read it as, and he ran down the street. In reality, it would probably take him a little while to run down the street unless he's super fast. But we just read it as one line, right? And part of the reason is because when we're writing action, what we're looking for is sequence of events, right? A number of things that happen in an order that we can imagine and imagine being exciting. So the question is, how do we pick the right words? How do we pick the right cadence to make sure that our action scene is interesting, is a good spice for our story, as opposed to just bland? And really that comes down to what our objective is. If we are trying to speed up the cadence of a story or the tension of a story, then we don't just want action, but we also want ambiguity. And I don't mean ambiguity in the sense of the scene is not clear. Instead, we want ambiguity of outcome. If, on the other hand, we want to simply communicate a specific thing, right? The main character is stronger than everybody else. The main character is not stronger than everybody else. The main character is having a hard time. The main character is having an easy time. We can communicate all of these different things through different sorts of action. But we have to decide ahead of time, what is my action scene actually trying to accomplish? What am I trying to do? If we're just trying to break up the story and make it, less dull because we've just been having a lot of talking, then what we want to focus on is short, sharp action that is just going to get the blood moving. That's not necessarily going to require any heavy emotional lifting on the part of the reader. Instead, we're looking for things that are going to just get our character into motion. Because when our character is in motion, that then becomes interesting to the reader. If instead our goal is to create a feeling, right, some sort of emotional tension, then what we want to do is actually lengthen our action scene. We don't want it short and sharp. We want it to be longer because we need time for the character's emotions to develop. Regardless of which one you're doing, you're going to want to pick language that is relatively punchy. You're going to want to have relatively short sentences. And obviously, these aren't hard and fast rules. They're more of guidelines that you can use, right? But you want the cadence of the writing to match the cadence of the action. And so if I have someone who is moving through a scene with supernatural grace, I'm going to make sure that the cadence of the story, of the words, follows that. So I'm going to be using flowing sentences. I'm going to be linking actions together, right? It's not, he punches him in the throat, he dodges, he punches the other guy, right? Instead, what I'm looking for is a sequence of movements, right? He punches, shifts, blocks, and kicks all in one motion. Right? Because that's going to give this sense of smoothness that we want for our character. If, on the other hand, our character is more of a bull in the china shop, right? He's going to smash, he's going to punch, and he's going to do everything in singular action, right? Direct, forceful, and relatively brutal. Because the bull doesn't move gracefully through the shop. The point is that the bull just smashes into everything and everything breaks. And so we achieve our aim, what we're trying to communicate to the reader, through the language we're using. And just as importantly, the cadence of the sentences themselves. So a couple of important things that you probably want to keep it under consideration as you're doing this. Slowing down is often the key to excitement. When we have an action scene, if it is high octane all the time, it creates a sort of exhaustion for our reader. And when everything is just even, whether it's even pegged really high or even pegged really low, it becomes boring. What's interesting to a reader is the shift in between, right? And so we want moments where the characters pause in the middle of the sword fight to exchange witty barbs, right? We want moments like that. Or we want to shorten the action and transform the scene into something that only has a little bit of physical action, but actually has a lot of anticipation and then wind down. And so a good example of that would be someone like John from my Battle Mage Farmer series, right? He is exceptionally strong, which might be the understatement of the century. But he's exceptionally strong. And so in the first book, there are a couple of action scenes. And you've already seen everybody sort of fighting against monsters throughout the book, and it's hard because the monsters are terrifying and they're fighting and it's difficult. And then something happens and John shows his power, and that fight scene, like the actual fight, lasts all of 2 lines because he just obliterates the monster. But what's important in that scene, in that action sequence, is the build up to it as everybody's anticipating this really difficult situation. And then the fall off as you realize that this entire time he could have literally just snapped his fingers and made all of these problems go away, right? And so that becomes an interesting scene because the action itself is so brief. And that illustrates a truth about the world for us that John is just completely, over-leveled. Likewise, you're going to want to stretch out a scene where the main character is going to be struggling, is more, equal to the people that they're fighting. But you still want those moments of slow to highlight the moments of fast. This is why in fights in movies, in anime, whatever, somebody will get backhanded or punched and they'll fall to the ground, and their opponent waits for them to get back up. That's not how real fights go. In real fights, especially between skilled people, the action doesn't stop until one person's done, right? One person's tapped out, one person's dead. It is just constant. People don't take moments to breathe and monologue. That just doesn't happen. But we want to include those things because, again, our goal is not to just replicate reality actually as it is. Our goal is to communicate a feeling to the reader. And so if the feeling that you're trying to communicate is one where the main character is struggling against their opponents, then it's very important that we have action, but it's not just constant action. So a great example of this is I wrote a scene for my Exilian Syndrome series, and in it, the main character comes up against an enemy, and they're about evenly matched, and so they fight sort of evenly for a while, and then the main character overcomes and wins, right? Has sort of a level up and wins the fight. And my editor really wisely pointed out that it just wasn't very interesting, right? There was never any suspense about whether the main character was going to win. And because the level up came so close to the sort of moment of panic, it just felt anticlimactic. And so I had to go back through, and I didn't actually change that much about the action. Instead, what I did is I went through and I added space in between the actions. I added space to lengthen the fight. I had them moving a little bit more. I had the villain monologue a little bit. I had, the moment of realization and the moment of level up take just a little bit longer. An extra paragraph here, an extra paragraph there. And what that did is it really nicely fleshed out this entire scene. And so all of a sudden the level up feels significant, and the entire fight suddenly felt more exciting than it had before. And I did that, again, not by increasing the amount of action, but the opposite. I added space. In fact, space is really the secret ingredient to good action scenes. Another thing that I did in this scene in order to sort of lengthen it is I added complexity. The environment around them changes, and so that all of a sudden creates new problems that each of them have to overcome in order to continue the fight. And adding complexity is also a really good way to keep from your fights becoming, or your action scenes really, becoming stagnant. Because over the course of a story, if your character is repeating an action over and over and over again, it's going to be boring. So what's really interesting is in movie making, there's this there's this principle that you never want to go back to the same place in a shot. That is to say, you might be in the same room or the same space, but there's always something that's different about it. So every scene might be shot in a location, but then the location changes or something about the location changes when you're moving into the next scene or into a future scene that's even supposed to be in the same place, right? And so if you are going back in a movie to the same exact scene, the same exact shot, then what you're going to discover is that it's being used as a tool to get you to feel a particular way, to feel the sameness. But most of the time, we completely shift the shot so that the viewer is always engaged and is always interested. When we're writing, we want to do the same thing, especially with action sequences. If we have a character who is fighting on a battlefield, we need to change something about the battlefield for the next battlefield fight, right? If they're fighting to defend a castle, we need to change the location where they're fighting in order to make it interesting. Because the reality is if my main character is defending the wall from, an onrushing horde of aliens, and the aliens are, swarming up the wall, I can only have my character stand there and play whack-a-mole so long before it's just not interesting. And then if later in the story there's another big attack and I just have him go back to the same wall and whack aliens again, it's not super interesting. So instead, what I have to do is I have to figure out ways to shift the environment. Maybe one of the walls collapses. Maybe my character has to go outside the wall for some reason. Maybe, he's on his way to the wall and he gets ambushed and he discovers that there are people inside the city, that there are enemies inside the city. Whatever it is, I need to figure out ways to change the environment to make the same action, right? He's still whacking them the same way he did on top of the wall. It's just a new environment, and so the context is different, and so the action, even though it is the same action, feels different. What's important is how we make our reader feel. So you can change the environment. You can also change the context in other ways, right? You can include other people. You can include other weapons. You can include other environmental challenges. You can include new powers or new move sets or new whatever it is, in order to make the same action, right? My character is running away from somebody, more interesting. He's learned parkour. Now he's going to run away on the roof, or the next time he's going to crawl down into a sewer and everything's really gross and icky, and now he's going to go there. And maybe now he's running through a forest and he's doing the same thing. He's running away from people, but it's interesting every time because the circumstances are different. And so the action itself becomes more interesting. So I hope this video was helpful and that my probably incoherent rambling wasn't that incoherent. Let me know down in the comments below if it was incoherent, and also let me know if there was anything in particular that you're going to take and apply to your writing. And if you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you and invite you Monday through Friday, as many days as I am able. I stream writing sprints from 7:30 a.m. till about noon. I would love for you to join me, come and write alongside me. It's a great time, and we're getting tons of work done, so hopefully I'll see you there.